More and more people are stepping into the sand and adapting their ways to the corporate ways. They've forgotten how to have new ideas after being trained that success depends on how well you execute old ideas. See, they're stuck in career quicksand. What are your thoughts there?
We, as a nation of employers, do a terrible job of letting people try new ideas. And the idea is if you walk into a company, you'll say, and someone comes up with a crazy idea, good or bad, someone will say, we don't do that here. That's terrible. That's terrible. The people who really have transformative organizations, the companies that are really transformative, encourage people to think outside the box and encourage them to make mistakes. You learn to repeat. And because of that, you end up in this quagmire of I am stuck. I don't know how to think anymore. I don't know how to be creative. I don't know how to do anything transformative.
You are listening to Personalization Outbreak, a podcast about the collapse of traditional corporate standards in today's more personalized world. I'm Glenn Llopis. I'm a leadership strategist, author, contributor to Forbes, and founder of the Leadership in the Age of Personalization movement. On this show, I'm interviewing executives across multiple sectors to find out how the balance between standardization and personalization can exist. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Personalization Outbreak Podcast. This is a special series focused on Make Reinvention Your Superpower. How to help people escape career quicksand and revive their future. Yes, you're all in career quicksand at some level. I know you are, and you know it too. But we're going to jump in there so you understand that you're not alone and there's ways to break out of it. Now, you can imagine that with the special series, you should expect special guests, leaders who have not only experienced reinvention, both personally and professionally, but they also know the importance of self-directing your leadership. They understand why there's an urgent need for people to deconstruct what they've become to achieve in the world as it was and to reconstruct who they are in order to be ready to thrive in a world that's still unclear. Our special guest today is Nancy Hubbard. Oh, Nancy. I've known Nancy for quite a while, and she is a treat. Hold on tight. So it shouldn't surprise you that Nancy's a best-selling author of several business books with over 15 years of consulting experience, specializing in strategy development, culture and change management, M&A activity, joint ventures and alliances, as well as organizational and team assessments and effectiveness. Now, Nancy is a principal consultant at Humann Advisors, and needless to say, you're in for a treat. She's going to really get deep into what it means to make reinvention your superpower. But before we get started, please click the like button below, share it with your colleagues, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and social media at Glenn Llopis. Nancy, it's a pleasure. It's an honor, my dear friend, to have you part of this series. Thank you so much for all your support with the book and everything that you've ever done for me. And it's people like you that have really not just only inspired me, but has had my back during this journey of mine. So thank you so much for being with us.
It is such a pleasure to be here. And after I do this, I will have about 3 weeks where I'm walking around on a cloud pumped up because I really enjoy talking with you and, really brainstorming on ideas and finding ways that we can do things better.
Well, that's a perfect way of taking us, through this process. It's finding ways that we can do things better. And especially at a time, it's such all this uncertainty, but I've always said that we're actually living in the most opportunistic times in modern history. And I know that that's hard to see when you've been asked to do things a certain way for so long, you lose touch with the changing world around you. And now that you know deep down inside that you have to do something differently with your life, let alone your career, it feels scary. It feels heavy. So, but we're going to help people realize that it's not as heavy as they think, and they're also not alone. And I think this is the beautiful part when you're living at a time like this, because it really forces us to start building community. and because we're all in this together. So, Nancy, if it's okay with you, I'm going to start by sharing some statements, maybe two of them,
Mhm.
and then just give us your initial reactions or thoughts around them. Okay, here's the first one. Most people are not prepared to direct their own reinvention. They've been navigating their careers based on the particular rules of a specific job rather than what matters to them. What comes to mind when you hear that? In fact, maybe what comes to mind based upon your own experiences?
Well, so that I 100% fundamentally agree. And part of that is that we've been trained to do that for years. So so I'm old. When I
Wait a
went,
second. You're not old. You're not old. Come on. You're not old, number
okay,
one. Number
I
two is that you are maturing and becoming not just wiser, but the truth is you're throwing a Benjamin Button on us because you're getting younger because as you face these challenges, your entrepreneurial mindset is taking on new life. So
it,
sorry to interrupt, but go ahead, Nancy.
and thank you. Yes, it has. I am really excited about the future for the first time in an awfully long time. But when people in the 80s started in work organizations, it was really started to phase out in the 70s. But even in the 80s, I have friends who in college went to work for one employer and they spent their entire career with one employer. So that employer gave them opportunities within the organization for them to navigate a career path. But really, their career path was dictated to them by their employer. And if they were really good employees, they would spend their whole career there. And the employer really didn't want them to leave. So they'd give them enough opportunities that you'd move here, you'd move there, you'd jump over here, you'd do this, you'd that. But it meant that by the time you got to the top, you were really well trained and you could run the organization. And that doesn't happen anymore. And when I was teaching, I would teach kids in human resources, and I'd say, guess what? You're your own human resource director. You've got to figure out what skills, what qualifications, what jobs you need to hold to give you the training and qualifications you need to hold the job you want to have. And it can be in this company, it can be outside, it can be certifications, it can be doing graduate work, whatever it is, but no one is going to manage your career anymore except for you. And that's quite scary for a lot of people, but it should also be really exhilarating because you are in control of your destiny. And that is more so now than any other time that I have ever seen. So there are very, very few people now that will go into their careers and work with one organization the whole time. Very, very few.
I love that. That takes us to the second statement. And I know you're going to have something really good here. More and more people are stepping into the sand and adapting their ways to the corporate ways. They've forgotten how to have new ideas after being trained that success depends on how well you execute old ideas. See, they're stuck in career quicksand. What are your thoughts there?
We as a nation of employers do a terrible job of letting people try new ideas. And the idea is if you walk into a company to say, and someone comes up with a crazy idea, good or bad, someone will say, we don't do that here. That's not how we do things here. Rather than say, okay, here's someone trying to be creative, trying to think outside the box, and we don't let them do that. We shut them down right away. That's terrible. That's terrible. The people who really have transformative organizations, the companies that are really transformative, encourage people to think outside the box and encourage them to make mistakes. And that really is not the norm in business or higher ed. And we don't train that. We want people, this is what you learn. You have to learn how to memorize stuff. You just, repeat it back. And that's how you learn to think. It's not thinking, you learn to repeat. And because of that, you end up in this quagmire of I am stuck. I don't know how to think anymore. I don't know how to be creative. I don't know how to do anything transformative. And if you look at companies, Kodak was a market leading company. They did not see the writing on the wall of new technology that came up and nailed them. And so they went out of business. Yet you have other firms that were in the same space who said, hey, you know what? Digital cameras are really coming up. I need to reinvent. and start either changing the way I do things, go into other areas that require films like X-rays. They pivoted really quickly. The people working in those companies were not in quicksand because they had the ability to say, hey, I see these threats and I can react to them. It is the lifeblood of creativity and change, is having that ability to think outside the box. And it's amazing how companies just squelch that because it's easier to manage people when they're not thinking.
Well, in this, I like to have our audience have a look at this PwC Pulse survey. Opportunity is in reinvention. And one statistic that's very alarming, 30% of CEOs believe that their competitors will be out of business in 2 to 3 years. And they also say that 59% of CEOs have a clear vision for the future, yet only 41% of them don't have, or believe, 41% of them don't have a clear consensus on how they're going to get there. I mean, does that sound promising to you? It doesn't to me. But what it says is that everything that you've said is the consequence of what the numbers are telling us. In other words, this stuff is real.
100%.
And we just can't wait anymore. And again, this is another reason why reinvention needs to become your superpower. It's not going to go away.
Right.
So let's do this, Nancy. Let's have you jump into skill number 2 of make reinvention your superpower. No. But before we go there, if you don't mind, Nancy, I'm going to do a quick overview of each of the 6 skills so that people understand the totality of the journey. So number 1 is discover. Harness your natural curiosity to discover something new. Number 2 is know, the skill you're going to be talking about. Ground yourself in an always open learning mindset. 3 is pursue. Rev up the engines of your new ambition. Now, those are the 3 things that will help us as individuals expand ourselves. Now, to accelerate and multiply what we've learned about ourselves is we have to build, take action with and for others. That's number 4. Number 5, trust. Cultivate a deeply rooted sense of yourself and your ability to elevate others. 6, use your newfound influence to strengthen your purpose. So we can see here that this is hard. It's not easy. But yeah. Go ahead, Nancy.
No, none of this is easy. And it's sometimes it's having the courage of your convictions to actually go out and do this. And a lot of people don't have that. And there may be financial reasons, maybe a whole bunch of reasons why you can't do it. But it is amazing if you do this in a proactive, considered way, how it can revolutionize your life. And I'm not saying go do something crazy like, sell everything and go do something wonky without having done all these other steps. But if you've done all the other steps and done your research, a lot of times you're going to be successful. Now, I love these points because I have done this 3 times in my life. I've done what you're describing. 2 of them were wildly successful. 1 was a disaster. And the one that was a disaster comes back to your no. And what we're talking about is no. When I was years ago, probably 10 years ago, I was in an Oxford business alumni event in New York. And I was asked to do a talk on, my career. And I had a young student say to me, what are the 3 words that describe your personal brand? And I had to completely stop. And I thought, whoa. I'm in the middle of a talk. And this was the question. I'm like, I can't go on. I got to think about this. So I literally thought, and then I started to try to go on. I'm like, I'm really sorry. I got to figure this out in my mind before I can go on. So I sat there for a couple of minutes. Everyone's kind of chuckling. And then I said, okay, I've got the 3 things that are my personal brand, the 3 words that describe it. And so it was curious, holistic, and empathetic. I really need to be doing something that helps people. And those are the 3 that really, and the third, humor figures into it. There are a whole bunch of ones that figure into it, but really it comes down to people and stories. And I want to believe I'm helping making the world or people a better place. So I started to think back then on my career and my crazy 3 times or 4 times that I have totally changed careers. The one that was not aligned with my personal brand was the one that was not a success. And that was, I went out, I was consulting all over the world for banks and which I really loved, but it meant that I lived in a hotel my entire life. And I wanted to have more of a normal life. I quit and I bought a deli and a wine store and set up a catering company. And I became an entrepreneur. That after 6 months, I was bored out of my tree because it did not help me. It was not helping me on Curious. It did not help me on Holistic. And so I started consulting again on the side, which I really enjoyed. And I was lucky enough that I could sell it. I sold the business, did fine, but it was not a resounding success compared to the other things I've done. So when I think about what you need to know, and your second point is you really need to find careers that are aligned with what makes you tick. And really that parlays into those advantages.
Okay, now let's jump in. That's you laid that up perfectly. So part of what no is and we discussed this. Most people don't have a grounded sense of who they are because they've had to be and achieve whatever the role has demanded in their workplace, in their career. So this really requires us to have this ability to have this always open learning mindset. Okay. So it brings together what? The ideas of knowing yourself, like you talked about your personal brand, knowing what matters to you. Well, you know that you're empathetic, you look holistically, and you're extremely curious, which makes someone in standardization, people that have done things a certain way, they view you as being like an outsider, like almost a threat when you are an enormous opportunity.
100%.
And I'm sharing this because people that are listening or watching this right now, hopefully that's clicked with them. Like, wow, he just spoke to me, because that's what's happening right now with all this difference. You're not here to fit into anything. It's all about value creation, but it's also about knowing what's going on in the world and where you might add the most value in this world that we live in. So with that context in mind, Nancy, let's go through the 5 essential ingredients to knowing. Now, I want to share this caveat. These 5 ingredients, why are there 5 of them? Well, first of all, the research showed clearly these are the 5, but for some people, maybe 2 or 3 of them might work best for them because we're all different. Or there may be one that they're struggling with. So I know you're going to give us some incredible insights here. So here we go. The first one is really the kicker. You got to face the truth. I mean, look, if I can step back, I know in my own career, I've had to face a lot of truths. And one of them was, I am just very different than most people. And fortunately, I had a father who helped me see this in me at a very young age. But I think all of us deep down inside know that we're different. But when you live in a world where you have to fit in or assimilate to everybody else just to find a friend, let alone get a job, when now you're in this time of uncertainty, which is really a pool of opportunity, this is a time where that difference really needs to step up. So I know that as I have faced my truth, some of the hardest decisions I've made, in fact, many of those decisions, I've wondered if those were the hardest decisions I made, not because they were hard to make, but to face the truth that I was wired to do something that was actually hard to do. So anyway, enough of me. Talk to us about facing the truth and how has this served to your advantage?
Well, and it's funny, I wish I had been asked that question, what are my 3 brand words that describe my brand, 40 years ago, because it would have made my life a heck of a lot easier. I was fumbling around in the dark, doing stuff that I did not realize were aligned and fit with my personal brand. And what I tell people is figure out what your brand is and never take a job that does not feed those characteristics, because A, you'll be miserable, which means that you'll only like the parts of the job that align with those values. And B, if you're miserable, you're not going to do a good job. And it's amazing how many students, when I was teaching, would say, well, I said, what do you want to do with your life? I don't ever ask, what's your major? What do you want to major in? Because that's almost irrelevant for what you want to do with your life, because that's this is over here, that's part of the path. And they say, I want to make a lot of money. No, 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 no. figure out what you really want to do. You'll be good at it and you'll make money. So that's an end result. But I am wildly learning disabled, wildly ADHD. And again, I'm old enough that they didn't know about this when I was growing up. I have children that are, and I said to them, your superpower is the fact that you are dyslexic and you're ADHD because you don't think like everybody else. And that makes you incredibly valuable in an organization because they think this way and you think this way. And that means as long as you learn how to be bilingual and operate in both spheres and don't be offensive and trying to say, hey, have you thought about doing it this way? And then you find companies that value the fact that you think this way, you'll be great. Virgin Atlantic, Richard Branson is well known for his dyslexia and learning disabilities. Almost everybody in Virgin Atlantic thinks like this rather than like this. So when they have meetings, they come up with really wacky, wild, creative ideas, which is part of the reason I think they've been so successful over time. So part of it is figuring out what your brand is and then aligning yourself with careers that feed and stoke that brand, and then also companies within those areas that appreciate and value those. And that's really hard to do.
Well, it is, but let's go back to the example of when you did it, at least the one that you shared previously. When you opened up this deli shop, you had to face the truth. Like that just wasn't what you thought it was going to be.
No, and I thought I'd be great at that. I thought this is great. I liked hanging out and meeting with people. I was bored to tears with everything else because I wasn't learning every day. Once I learned how to do everything, I was like, wow, I'm bored. And then it wasn't really that holistic. Holistic to me is solving big holistic problems. There wasn't that much of a problem to solve. Once I figured it out, I was really bored. So after that, I picked careers that fed those things that made me good at what I did. And I, for a while, again, I was writing down before we talked, I've had 4 really distinct careers. And 3 of the 4 were great. One of them, probably the one I enjoyed the most, was I was a TV sports producer because I had won the scholarship to go back to Oxford to do my doctorate, and I had almost a year to kill. And just by happenstance, I walked into this job. It was a short-term 1-year contract. I took it. Every day I get to go watch sports footage all day long and then create programming based on sports footage. It was.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
Oh, it was the best job ever. But it was holistic. It was creative. I was learning every day. It was fantastic. So every job I've had that I've really enjoyed, and I think you have to enjoy it to be good at it, has played on the things that are important. And the thing that was interesting is the stories that were the most interesting is where you really got to know the athlete, or there was a human story behind the event, and it was all about people. And the beauty of sports bringing people together or creating, superstars and their vulnerabilities. I mean, it was fantastic. Best job ever. But it played on my strengths. And again, I didn't know that at the time, but in retrospect, that's why I think I did well in that job and I enjoyed it so much.
Okay, so you really need to stay true to who you are, what you represent, and what you stand for. And that takes a lot of courage, especially when you feel like an outsider. But the point here is that see that sense of feeling isolated as a strength, because there's a lot of people that want to gravitate to what makes you distinct. And you have to have the courage to realize that so that you can reach your dreams. I love that, Nancy. Let's go to number 2. You have to be able to balance and direct emotion. What's your thought on self-regulation and why is that so important to know?
Boy, I would love more of it. No, no, it is really important. The number of times I've said to people that I'm mentoring, it's not what you're saying that's the problem. What you're saying is fabulous. It's how you're saying it is the problem. So that is a skill that can be learned. And it's the ability, that self-discipline, which, to be clear, I have lacked at times, as everybody has. You need to learn and grow from that. Yeah. Again, the more outside of box thinker you are, I think the more frustrated you can get with what's going on around you, and you're like, I'm speaking, you're not hearing me. I'm seeing this crystally clear, and you're not hearing me. And then you get frustrated. I get frustrated, and then I don't say it in a way where people hear me. To me, that self-regulation, if I knew now, if I knew when I was 30, what I knew now in terms of growing that way, holy smokes, I would have been a much better person.
Well, this takes us to number 3. You have to show up with clarity of thought. Talk to us about the importance of having poise.
So to me, I have the number of times I'm working in academia for a long time. As you know, I worked in academia in Europe and then in the United States, both as an academic and as an administrator. There is a risk that you talk a lot rather than talk with clarity. And I do that because I'll get off on a tangent, blah, 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 rather than, and the person who really looks like the sage is the person who doesn't say very much, but when they say it, it's like they say it, they drop the mic and they walk away and you're like, holy smokes. And I have always been in awe of people like that. And to do that, you really need to have that, go back to your self-regulation. I'm not going to chime in on something that's irrelevant. I'm going to chime in on what's really important. And when I say it, I'm not going to dilute what I say with little bits and bobs here. I'm just going to save it for when it's really impactful, because then I know people are more likely to listen.
Bingo. And more likely to ask you more questions,
right?
Which means what? You're now getting discovered. In other words, sometimes people don't have that poise or sense of thought because they're trying to be what other people want them to be rather than what they seek to be themselves. And so when you have that poise, it also it exudes confidence and gets people to realize, you know what? Nancy really knows what's going on around here. It's the way it works. Okay, well, that takes us to situational awareness, having maintaining a grounded understanding of reality. This is a tough one. Why is it so difficult?
Well, and I think because what happens is people lose the forest for the trees, and they say they get so wound up on this little point that big picture, it's the holistic thing again. You're losing the big picture. And the idea is you may point score on a little tiny point, but that doesn't really matter. Who cares? What you're trying to do, there's an expression, you can win the battle, but lose the war. And you don't want to do that. You're thinking for the end game. And a lot of times people get really nitpicky and they say, hey, but this person really said something and I have a problem with that. They don't necessarily how to deal with conflict appropriately. And again, if you're an out of the box thinker, you're in conflict with the world a lot of the times. And what you have to do is then say, okay, I can move beyond that point and say, hey, it's okay. I can understand this is the context of why you said and did that. Let's move to the big picture. And it may make you appear weak, but that's okay too, because you'll show your strength at other times and in other situations.
And that's the whole point. We may not always fit in how we contribute to every situation. So you have to be really grounded in understanding how and why you need to show up and not show up. Is that a fair statement?
100%. And I think also this goes back to a point you made earlier on confidence. Out of the box thinkers have been ground down to think that they're not good enough because they don't think the way everybody else does. So I think there is often an ability, I think the reason why there are so many successful entrepreneurs who are dyslexic, who are out of the box thinkers, that they've gone off on their own and they've said, you know what, I'm not fitting in another person's playground. I'm going to set up my own playground.
Well, this goes back to, this is why when we're given a playbook and it doesn't align with who we are,
right,
and what we know, something doesn't feel right. And I think this is back to what I'm learning from this conversation, is that we oftentimes feel that we're the problem when it might just very well be the institution, the employer, the leader, the 100%. Department that doesn't jive with who I am. So who's at fault? We think it's us, and we suppress those feelings rather than realize, wait a second, they don't see the opportunity in me. I like to share a quick story, if I may, around this. Nancy, I received a LinkedIn request for a discussion, and I'll try to do my best to blind this discussion because it's really sensitive. But the bottom line is this person said to me, "Look, Glenn, I'm happily married. I have two kids, are both going to Ivy League schools, but I'm unemployed. Here's why I'm unemployed, because the last two Fortune 500 companies I've worked for, they found my differences to be a threat. And they said that I didn't fit anymore. And I'm saying, wait a second, you guys are trying to transform, find new ways of working, find new areas to innovate in. Maybe I don't fit, but aren't I the one trying to add all the value? Why would you make me feel so? His whole point was, this is how I'm going to start approaching my career, Glenn. He says, I'm going to go find a company that aligns with my beliefs. But more importantly is I'm going to create a job for that company I want to work for. If they don't see the value in who I am, I'm going to the next one.
Mhm.
I'm no longer going to fit in a box. And this is the theme that you've been taking us on. Outside the box, outside the box. Reinvention is about having no box at all.
Right, right.
And I know that sounds chaotic, but what's the value of that,
Right.
Nancy?
And do you know what's funny? He's going to end up being an entrepreneur. And because he's not going to find a Fortune 500 company that's going to let him be an entrepreneur, maybe he will. You know, entrepreneurs are very fascinating creatures that can do this, but he's going to end up going to set up his own company and being wildly successful. And because people like him, you, me, we're very hard to manage because we don't fall in line. If we see an issue, we're going to see like, oh, there's a problem here, which is what you want. You don't want yes men. You want people who know people. They make you push the ideas and think in different ways.
But think about what we've just talked about. If the goal is to make reinvention our superpower, what's that going to mean to employers? Whether they like it or not, they're going to have to start accepting these realities. Right. And by the way, let's be fair. There are organizations that have created their own innovation labs, whether they've built them internally, organically, and or acquired them from the outside, because they actually realize that what got them to the first 100 years or 50 years isn't going to get them to that next increment. So these things are real.
Right. So this concept of an entrepreneur is exactly what you're talking about. It's the company that says, okay, I know that I need to have innovation and growth, but I know that this person is going to be tough to manage in our traditional structure. So you know what? Put them over on the side, let them do their work, help and support them the way I can. But that requires a different kind of manager. And it's like, the joke is my husband would say when I was working in academia, he said, how do you manage these people? You can't fire anybody. And I said, well, you know, it's different. You just got to make it think it's their idea. You got to get buy-in. It takes a really long time to make decisions. But once you do, it's really easy to implement. And the first job I ever had when I was consulting, I was working in Norway and I was working for, I won't tell you the guy's name, but it was a very prestigious bank. And the CEO, the chairman of the board was the head of a very prestigious company, a Scandinavian company. And I could not get over how long it took to make decisions there. Everybody came up with these wild out of the box ideas. Yeah, again, no box ideas. This. And he's trying to, like a maestro, trying to coordinate them all and get them into some semblance of a strategy. It took forever. It was driving me nuts. I was like, make a decision. Eventually, they all reached a consensus. They made a decision. And then implementation was a breeze and it was really innovative and it was phenomenal. And it's because he knew to manage, you have to let people operate in the way they are, let them be wacky, let them be unconventional, but you're going to come up with a really interesting plan.
Well, what that individual did was lead in the age of personalization.
Exactly.
He allowed people to unleash their individuality, their ways of being, their brands. And this is why I've called this book, Make Reinvention Your Superpower, because we've reached a point for our global economy where we have to. Now,
Right.
There's certain people that have to stay in that box, and that's okay too. The point is, don't minimize yourself just because you feel like you need to be in it if you think there's a lot more that you have to contribute. So let's go to this last ingredient, which is hard. And we're talking a lot about it these days, and that's resilience.
Yes.
But notice how I position this. We have to partner with our own pain and do what's hard. Why is that so important, Nancy?
Well, and so an athlete. I was one of these lunatics who did sports till I was 30. I did swam my last swim meet for Oxford when I was 31 years old.
And by the way, Nancy, can I just jump in there and also let everybody know that I think when you were a teenager, you were a rising model too. I mean, come on, let them find out all about you.
Long time ago. So in a galaxy far, far away. So there's a reason why very competitive employers like athletes. And it's not just athletes, it's dancers, it's people who have had jobs while they were in college. And like hard jobs. One of my students now, former student, is a realtor selling $1 million houses while she's going to school. I mean, amazing student. So and I would say, you learn goal setting, you learn time management, the thing I think you learn the most is resilience, because you are never going to win every race. So Michael Phelps, even when he was the best swimmer in the world, he still lost races. And what was wild is he and his coach would put himself in places where they knew he would lose races or be close, because it brought out the best in him, the fiery competitor. He'd do better than he ever had. And it made him comfortable with the idea that I am not going to win every time. And don't expect employees to do that either. It's insane to think you're hiring someone and they are going to hit a home run, if they're going to even get on base, using a baseball analogy, every single time. They're not going to. I'm not saying you want people constantly losing, but what you want to do is set them up and give them the opportunity to learn so they only lose once doing that mistake.
So, when that story makes me think of this statement I'd love for you to react to. Should you disrupt your comfort zone, or should you be forced to embrace discomfort?
It is so hard to embrace discomfort. And it's why so many people who are famous for going on to new careers have only done so under duress. And I'll give you an example. There's a very famous author who is a wonderful person named Jan Karen. So Jan was an advertising executive who wrote for fun. She ended up leaving the industry, and she had some time, and she wrote a novel. And she has sold something like 20 or 30 million books now. She would have never, I don't think she would have done that had she not been forced, because discomfort is very hard to leave your comfort zone, especially if you're successful. So this idea that, you can reinvent yourself if you are financially secure, it's a lot easier. If you have no choice, you have no choice. So what I tell people is, before you have the kids, a mortgage, all the responsibilities of having to have an income, save enough money that gives you a year. And this is so easy for me to say now, older, at the end of my, later edges of my career, but save enough money that gives you time to have that discomfort if you need to, and go out and take chances. Because if you are 25 years old, you have a lot more ability to face discomfort than if you have a 5-year-old kid and a mortgage and other people that are relying on you. I mean, I did it. I was 24 years old when I did it. I did, when I quit my fabulous job and bought this deli and wine store. And you know what? It all worked out okay. And I learned that I was not an entrepreneur. I learned that I needed to be doing stuff that was a different career. And I learned from doing something and failing as much as I would have if I had been successful. So, but you just got to learn from it.
Nancy, look, this has been so enlightening, and I just thank you for your time. Every time we have these discussions, I learn so much, not just from you, but about you. And I think this is the beauty of reinvention. You're constantly learning about yourself. You're constantly learning about those around you. And quite candidly, you start learning about maybe some relationships that haven't really added any value to your life. I'm here to tell you that you've done nothing but add value to mine. And I'm so appreciative of it, because it's hard to find people that you can just not only connect with, but learn from, and the relationships that that just keep giving, and that's just the type of person that you are. So I feel that I've accomplished one big thing, this understanding that you are in alignment, because we both have curiosity. We both love the holistic, bigger picture around us, and we're very empathetic, and it's all about people. And this is a type of relationship that is priceless. So I just want to say thank you for all your support with the book. I'm here to support you in any way I can possibly support you. But thank you, and I hope that a lot of people.
Versa.
Well, thank you, and I hope that everyone that's listening and watching get a sense that reinvention can be scary, but you can't go at it alone. And this is really important. You can't go at it alone. So if you can connect with the kind of relationship that Nancy and I have, go out and find those people in your life that are going to continually add value to you, because reinvention's a journey and there's never an end game.
Right,
you go
exactly.
until you can't anymore, but your job is to then pass those learnings along to the next generation and your children. So anyway, I just want to close by saying that. So thank you so much for your time and who you are, Nancy.
Thank you so much. I love talking to you and exploring all of these ideas always.
Well, as I mention at the end of every show of this series, when you make reinvention your superpower, you will see things that others don't, do what others won't, and keep pushing when prudence says quit. We'll be in touch soon, Nancy. Thank you again for your time.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to Personalization Outbreak. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. If you enjoyed the content, visit ageofpersonalization.com to check out our free streaming video series and learn how to get involved in the movement. I'm Glenn Llopis. I wish you a good day, and remember, without strategy, change is merely substitution, not evolution.